Welcome to the deep dive. We're going deep, really deep, into the life of Omar Mukhtar,
A pivotal figure, no doubt, in Libyan history, I mean.
a resistance leader who fought against, well, Italian colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
And get this, we've got our hands on some incredible source material.
Yeah, like what?
Historical texts, biographical accounts,
Huh?
and here's the kicker, all in Arabic.
Oh, wow. So we're talking original language, the real deal. This is exciting.
Exactly. We're going beyond those usual, the English language narratives you always see.
Mm-hmm.
Going to uncover some fascinating stuff today.
I bet. There's always so much more to the story when you can get to those original language sources.
Right. It's like you're getting a peek behind the curtain or something. So let's start with his early life. This is a man who goes from, scholar
Solid, yeah.
in a remote corner of Libya to, well, leading this huge resistance movement against an empire.
It's quite the journey.
How does that happen? What were those early days like for him?
Well, you're right. It is remarkable when you think about it. He was born in 1858, although some sources say 1862. It's always the way, isn't it?
Right. Pinning down those dates.
Exactly. But anyway, small village, Janzur, eastern Libya. His family, they were from the Manifa tribe, one of the largest Arab tribes in the region.
So not exactly, your typical image of someone who's going to become like a guerrilla leader.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Did that tribal background, did that play into his later leadership?
Oh, absolutely. Tribal identity was huge in Libya back then. Still is, really. And growing up in the Manifa tribe, it would have given him a deep sense of community, leadership, responsibility.
I see.
Values that would really resonate later on.
Yeah.
Think about it. When he had to call for unity against the Italians, it was like he was tapping into that shared identity.
So it's almost like those values were, ingrained in him from the very beginning.
Precisely. But, and this is important, his upbringing wasn't all, tribal life and all that. Tragedy struck early on. His father passed away during a pilgrimage to Mecca, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, tough break. And this event, it really had a profound impact on Omar Mukhtar. He was raised by his uncle then, the sheikh of the Janzur Zawiya,
Oh, yeah.
a religious school, a center of learning, you could say.
So even though he lost his father, he was still surrounded by, faith and knowledge and all that.
Exactly. And this is where his connection to the Senussi order comes in.
The Senussi order. This name keeps popping up everywhere in these sources. I have to admit, I'm a little fuzzy on what that was all about.
Right. So imagine kind of like a reform movement within Islam, gained a lot of traction in 19th century Libya.
Okay.
And the Senussi order, they established this whole network of zawiyas, like the one Omar Mukhtar attended.
Okay, so more than just religious schools.
Oh, yeah. Centers of learning, community, gathering places, even had a role in, local governance sometimes.
Like community hubs, but with this, strong spiritual foundation.
Exactly. And in this environment, Omar Mukhtar, his intellect, it really blossomed, excelled in his studies, particularly Islamic theology, Arabic. He even memorized the Quran.
Wow. Talk about dedicated.
Oh, yeah. His teachers, they saw something special in him, sent him to the Jagobu Institute.
Never heard of it.
Well, it was, think of it like the top tier, a higher learning center for the Senussi order. Studied under some big names, too. Sheikh Al-Mahdi as Senussi. Really the who's who of the Senussi world.
Wow, they were really, grooming him for something big, weren't they? Did he become a teacher at a Zawiya after all that?
He did. Became a sheikh himself, led various Zawiyas over the years, sharing his knowledge, deepening his understanding of, Islamic teachings and all that. And, this period was crucial for him.
I bet.
Not just intellectually, but also in terms of, leadership.
Yeah. I can see that.
Because remember, these Zawiyas, they weren't just about, hitting the books. They were about guiding people, resolving disputes, building consensus, honing those leadership skills.
Which, as we'll see, become pretty important later on.
Right. Like it always does, doesn't it? History has a way of shaking things up.
And by 1911, they're getting interesting in North Africa. The Ottoman Empire, they'd controlled Libya for, centuries? Anyway, they're on the decline.
And there's Italy, seeing an opportunity. Always the way, isn't it?
A chance to expand their empire, grab a piece of Africa for themselves. And they weren't exactly subtle about it, were they?
Subtle? No, not really their style. A full-blown invasion. Can't say I blame the Libyans for being a bit upset about that.
Right. Imagine someone just, I don't know, showing up on your doorstep with warships and declaring you're part of their country now. Not cool. So Omar Mukhtar, our scholar, our teacher, this is where he, like, steps onto the world stage, becomes a resistance leader.
He was in his 50s at this point, which, when you think about it, isn't exactly the age you picture for, leading a revolution.
Not your typical image of a revolutionary, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So how did people react to him? I mean, did they immediately see him as the guy to lead them against the Italians?
He had this presence, These sources, they all talk about his quiet authority, commanded respect. And not just because of his knowledge, his faith, but like his reputation for fairness, wisdom. People trusted him.
He'd put in the work, right? Years leading the Zawiya, guiding people. It's all connected. But still, how do you go from, like, religious school to leading a guerrilla war against a modern army with, guns and cannons and all that?
That's what makes this so fascinating. The sources, they show how he used those Islamic teachings, those principles, to organize the resistance. Take jihad, for example. It's a complex idea. I know it gets a bad rap in the West, but it's more than just holy war. It's about resisting injustice, striving to do what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you.
So he was framing this as, like, a righteous struggle. And on top of that, he knew that terrain like the back of his hand.
Oh, absolutely. He knew they couldn't take on the Italians head on. That would be suicide. No, he used the desert to their advantage. Guerrilla tactics, hit and run, ambushes, using those wadis, those oases to disappear into the landscape.
And those early years, some pretty incredible stories about their victories. Like, they actually won some battles.
Take the Battle of Friday, 1913, near Derna. Omar Mukhtar and his men, totally outnumbered, but they knew the land. They inflicted heavy casualties on the Italians, really threw them for a loop.
You mentioned something earlier about him encountering a lion. Sounds a little far-fetched, doesn't it?
I know, right? Almost too good to be true. But there are multiple accounts, even in the Italian records. They're talking about Omar Mukhtar facing down a lion. It's like something out of a movie.
So what happened?
The story goes, he's camped with his men, lion approaches. Everyone's freaking out, right? But not Omar Mukhtar. Cool as a cucumber. Just grabs his rifle, stands his ground, scares the lion off.
Talk about earning your stripes.
Yeah.
Or, in this case, your lion taming badge.
Seriously. It's those kinds of stories that spread, Cement his image as this, like, larger-than-life leader, fearless in the face of anything. Lions, Italians, you name it.
So he's a brilliant military mind, a charismatic leader, but he also understood that unity, that was key. The sources, they talk about how he constantly appealed to the different Libyan tribes, like, put aside your differences, guys. We got to fight this together.
He knew a divided Libya, that was a recipe for disaster. An easy win for the Italians. And he wasn't afraid to call people out on it either. Criticized Libyans who were thinking about, surrender, exile. Saw it as abandoning their homeland.
So he's fighting on all these different fronts. Militarily, obviously, but politically too, even ideologically.
Yeah.
Trying to unite his people.
Exactly. But even the strongest movements, they face setbacks. And there's this turning point in the story, a real blow to Omar Mukhtar, his close friend, ally, Al-Hussein, captured by the Italians.
This wasn't just like a random soldier, right? This was someone close to him.
Al-Hussein, practically his right-hand man. And if these sources are accurate, there was some shady stuff involved. Betrayal within the resistance. It hit Omar Mukhtar hard, not just strategically, but personally.
I bet. So what did the Italians do? Execute Al-Hussein.
They were smarter than that, saw an opportunity. They shipped him off to Italy, exile. Figured, why make him a martyr? Better to break the spirit of the resistance, show them, even their top guys, they weren't untouchable.
Did it work?
Hard to say. The sources, they definitely show despair, but also this hardening of resolve, like, we're not letting his sacrifice be in vain.
But this whole thing with Al-Hussein, it seems to mark a change. Things get a lot darker from here, more brutal.
You're not wrong. The Italians, they're getting frustrated. They can't stamp out this resistance, so what do? Resort to increasingly ruthless tactics? Enter the flying tribunals.
Flying tribunals?
Yeah.
Sounds ominous.
They were. Basically, mobile military courts, roaming around, handing out swift, brutal justice, quote unquote.
Dealing.
The goal, pure terror. Make the cost of resistance too high? They targeted anyone suspected of helping Omar Mukhtar. Didn't matter if the evidence was weak.
So it's like they're trying to break the resistance, but also punish the entire population.
Two birds, one stone, right. And all this time, they're getting more and more obsessed with capturing Omar Mukhtar himself. He's more than just a leader now. He's a symbol, a legend.
Public enemy number one?
More than that. He represented their failure, a
Yeah.
thorn in their side, because as long as he was out there, they hadn't truly conquered Libya.
It's like, I don't know, it's a total David and Goliath thing, isn't it? This, like, aging scholar leading this resistance
Yeah.
against this modern army, and not just for a little while, we're talking decades. But even those epic stories, those legends, they got to end sometime.
They do. And when you read these Arabic sources, you really get this feeling of, I don't know, like it's all kind of closing in, years of fighting, the losses, the brutality, it takes a toll.
And then, boom, October 1931. This is it, right? The moment everything changes. What do the sources say about his capture? It must have, I mean, can you imagine?
It's actually pretty vivid. Like they describe it almost like it's a movie or something. Omar Mukhtar, he's with a small group of his men
Okay.
near Zawiyat Sultana, and bam, ambush. Italian troops, his horse gets hit, he's thrown to the ground, injured.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, can you imagine the shock?
Total disbelief, I bet. Especially for his followers. This was Omar Mukhtar. He was, like, invincible in their eyes.
Exactly, but here's the thing. Even then, even when he's down, these sources, they all talk about his defiance.
No way.
Yeah, there's this one account, claims to be from someone who was actually there, says Omar Mukhtar, injured, surrounded, he still draws his pistol, ready to fight to the death. And keep in mind, the guy's in his 70s by this point.
No way. What stopped him?
His own men. They basically begged him to surrender, said it was suicide. Pointless.
Heartbreaking.
Totally. But they couldn't bear to see him die like that.
So even at the end, he's still leading, still thinking of his men.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. The Italians, though, they were over the moon. Their prize, finally. Symbol of resistance. Check. They take him to Benghazi, put him on trial.
Oh, I bet that was a real fair trial.
Please, show trial.
Oh.
All for propaganda.
Yeah.
They'd already written the verdict before he even stepped foot in the courtroom.
And the sentence.
What else? Death by hanging. They wanted to make an example out of him, send a message, don't even think about messing with Rome.
Yeah. Brutal. But what always gets me, is how he handled himself throughout the trial, even facing execution.
Dignified.
Hmm?
The whole way. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. There's this one source, I think it was a prison guard's diary, talks about how Omar Mukhtar would comfort the other prisoners. Tell them, look, death, it comes for us all, but it's how you face it. That's what matters.
Wow. So much strength. Did the Italians at least let him say some last words? They did. And this is where you really see the legacy of the man, Omar Mukhtar. Standing there, on the gallows, thousands of Libyan prisoners forced to watch, and he addresses them. But it's not anger, it's not hatred, it's this message of, like, hope, resistance. He says, victory is for those who persevere, even if after a time. You may have to wait a long time, but you will be victorious.
Right there at the end, still fighting. What a moment.
And a pretty dangerous message from the Italian point of view. They thought, execute him, that's it, resistance over. Didn't quite work out that way. They underestimated him. His words, his example, it resonated far beyond that prison yard.
That image, right, of Omar Mukhtar standing tall, it became iconic.
Absolutely, a symbol of defiance. And not just in Libya. Throughout the Arab world, people saw in him, I don't know, this example of standing up to empire, fighting for what you believe in.
It's quite a story. From scholar to teacher to, like, guerrilla leader to, well, a martyr for a cause.
And here's a little something I found, kind of a fascinating detail. One of the biographical accounts, it mentions how Mussolini, years later, he sent a letter to Omar Mukhtar's family, expressing admiration for his courage.
Jet out. There's a record of that in the Arabic sources. See, this is what I love about digging into this stuff. You never know what you're going to find. But Mussolini, I mean, what do you think that was about? Guilt? Respect? Or just, like, grudging admiration for the guy who stood up to him for so long?
Who knows? Maybe a bit of everything. But whatever it was, it says something about Omar Mukhtar. Even in death, he had this power, forced his enemies to see him, to recognize his humanity, his spirit. You can't crush that.
It's a story that sticks with you,
Yeah.
This idea that courage, it can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
And that even when it seems like all hope is lost, one person, they can make a difference, inspire people for generations.
It's also a good reminder to look for those hidden stories, the voices that don't always get heard. Because those are the stories that, I don't know, they make us think, challenge what we think we know, enrich our understanding of the past and of ourselves.
Omar Mukhtar, I mean, his life as told through these Arabic sources, it's a testament to that. It's been amazing diving into his story with you.
Likewise.
And for everyone listening, don't stop digging. Keep asking those questions, uncovering those hidden histories. Because those stories, they're out there, just waiting to be found. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
At the end of this podcast, please share your thoughts on the book, and if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.